19 minutes now before 8 o'clock here on the early edition on CBC Radio. And I'm going to continue to talk hockey now because one thing that really has become a focus of attention is concussive injuries in all sports. But in hockey, players are larger, they're faster, and the hits are now even more punishing. Head injuries, big part of the game, of course, and they're devastating impacts that can change players' lives forever. Our next guest is the director of a documentary looking at how hockey culture is contributing to the concussion and mental health epidemic. Joe Recupero is also the program director for sports media at Ryerson University in Toronto, and he's here with us in Studio 10 this morning. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Why did you want to do this?
The documentary, I actually had to be convinced a bit because it was about 3 years ago when I was really busy with a bunch of different projects going on at the same time. And two psychiatrists who specialize in TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, they wanted to do a documentary about this to create awareness and also kind of destigmatize the whole issue around mental health issues. They tried to sort of do it on their own, and then quickly were realizing that you needed someone with sports production, documentary background. So it was just sort of circumstance. A man named James Minns, who was my entertainment lawyer on a documentary I did a few years before that, put us together because he knew them. And he literally, it's kind of a funny story. I hadn't spoken to James for a couple of years, and out of the blue, he sent me an email one day saying, I have these two psychiatrists at St. Michael's Hospital I'd like you to meet, just like that. And I went, I bet. And I went, okay, why? And I met them. And Dr. Ryan Todd and Dr. Shree Bhalerao really were the origins of this. And their passion for it, because they're medical doctors and psychiatrists, but they also are huge hockey fans, and they play in beer leagues and stuff, and they convinced me about how great the awareness we need to get out there.
We've talked a lot about this, and it's not just hockey, it's all sports, football in particular, a lot of concussive injuries there as well. Now, you focus on a player by the name of Max Taylor that got you interested in the subject. He's the lead character in the film. What was it about his story that captivated you?
Well, Dr. Shree Bhalerao invited me to a conference at St. Michael's Hospital where the big theme was about concussions. And Shree spoke, and he was very passionate, and he was great at sort of making this all very understandable to me as someone in the audience. Because sometimes these medical conferences, it's people speaking way above my head. I don't really know what they're talking about with all the medical jargon and lingo. Shree has a really great way of making it accessible. He also introduced Max Taylor, who told his story. And while I was sitting there in the conference hall, I realized that was the hook to bring us into the story. Because as I told both the doctors, I said, we don't want to make a 1 hour PSA because we need to tell a story, and you need a main character to bring you in and see their story.
Tell me a bit about Max's life and what happened since his concussion injuries.
Well, he was, one of many young men wanting a career in the NHL, and it was ended early because of a series of concussions. So he still plays recreationally. His wife sometimes doesn't really like that. But hockey is a big part of his life, and he's not going to give it up. But it can't be his career.
From what you've learned, how aware do you think players of all ages are about the possibility of concussive injury and the life-changing risks they're actually taking by playing the game?
Well, I think if you look sort of more historically, not very much before. I think more and more every year as it goes by with more and more studies going on, and then you look at the NFL and all these different things going on in the lawsuits, the awareness is out there. So I think more and more people are seeing that. And what this documentary is trying to do is not, say, put an end to hockey, because, like I said, both Shree and Ryan are these huge, passionate hockey players themselves. It's about creating awareness and making sure people know the severity that can happen if you do have a concussion, what can eventually happen.
What's changed, though, Joe, over the years? You and I were in sports, 20-some-odd years ago. It wasn't as bad as it is now. So what's changed?
stakes are higher, more competition. It's a variety of factors, right, that contribute to it. That, you know, what we sort of see is you have to get back to the grassroots level. If you can educate and make aware people who are coaching and kids and parents at the grassroots level, then hopefully the system changes over time.
But the game's changing as well. As I mentioned off the top, players are bigger now.
Yeah.
They're moving faster. And you say there's more at stake here. I mean, how do you remove head injuries from a contact sport played by such big athletes who reach speeds of over 30 kilometers an hour on the ice?
I know, that's the big thing. I mean, that's why, kids get weeded out of hockey. Everyone sort of starts equal when they're young in street hockey and wanting to play, and everybody dreams of being in the NHL. But we all kind of know as kids grow and get bigger, the smaller ones start getting weeded out. So it's a sport of power and strength. But the other thing about it is, myself, I played soccer up until a few years ago, and what sort of finished it for me to play was I had a concussion.
I was going to get to the soccer next one, because we always think about the contact sports like football, like hockey,
yeah.
But soccer now is also the focus of concussive injuries, and how kids, in heading the ball is rock hard, as you know.
Yeah.
And kids are kicking it harder, and it's traveling faster, and now we see more concussions there as well.
Yeah. And in fact, just a few months before I started on this project, I was in just a pickup game and was hit really badly and didn't even realize that I had a concussion because I was knocked to the pitch. First time in my life I really saw stars. But what did I do? I got back up and kept playing. And here I was in sports all my life and working in it, and I didn't know it myself. And it wasn't until I started working on the doc with Shree and Ryan and sort of talking about that, they're like, oh yeah, you had a concussion.
And in some sports too, the last point here I bring up, there's a stigma surrounding concussion.
Yeah.
Now you continue to play, and some hockey players, particularly at the really competitive levels, they say, it's a sign of weakness if you don't play because you've got a head injury. Why do you think that is, and how do we change that thought process?
That's a huge debate, and we deal with that in the documentary and talk about it, about sort of the macho culture around sport, and specifically in hockey in this doc. But it goes into the other sports, and men just generally have a worse time of seeking help. And one of the things we're trying to do with this documentary is hopefully try to erase the stigma of people who actually need some mental health professionals.
Good luck with it. Good luck with it, and thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Joe Recupero, who is the director of a documentary called A Dark Room. It shows tonight as part of the Fraser Health Brain Injury Film Festival.